Mike Evans, Jordan Love, and Jared Goff are moving up our fantasy rankings after yesterday's schedule release. We tell you why on today's episode of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen every day. I'm one of your co-hosts, Michelle Magdziuk, and when I'm not doing this, I'm a researcher and fantasy analyst with NFL Network.
And I'm your other co-host, Vinnie Iyer, and I'm not doing this. I'm writing about NFL, fantasy, betting, schedule, you name it, at sportingnews.com. Check out our breakdown of the 2024 schedule, every angle that you could imagine, winners, losers, all that good stuff. And we're going to talk about some of that in our next two shows as well from the fantasy angle.
Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Yeah, so today we're going to hit on fantasy relevant players, right, that have the best early season schedules. Tomorrow we'll hit on the worst early season schedules for fantasy, but it is important, right, how fast these guys can get out immediately to start the year. It kind of like imprints in everyone's brain. If you have a fast start, people are much more excited about them, are more willing to trade for them, or just like their value increases so much. When looking through these schedules right off the bat, number one best schedule to start the year, it's the Buccaneers, and specifically Baker Mayfield and Mike Evans. They get a beautiful start to the season. They get the Commanders, the Lions, the Broncos, the Eagles, the Falcons, even like you can go to the Saints, and I'm not that scared of them either, but Washington, Detroit, and Philly, 3 of the first 4 games, and they were all in the bottom 3 and allowing the most fantasy points per game to quarterbacks and wide receivers last year. So that gets me really excited for Baker and Mike Evans to start the year.
Yeah, that's a streaming alert as well. If you're playing that game, Baker Mayfield is an excellent guy to have early in the season, and you can ride him for a few games, which is great. And he's going to be available at a QB2 price for you, despite putting up some borderline QB1 numbers last year, which is nice all around. Maybe we're forgetting about Baker Mayfield. We haven't really talked about the Bucs passing game as they transition here from Dave Canales to Liam Cohen and what they have here, right? So it's going to be somewhat exciting to see what the Buccaneers can do here with their passing attack. And we know there's some established chemistry with Baker Mayfield and Mike Evans, which is great. Now they don't have to feel each other out this offseason. And yeah, this Bucs offense, maybe we're not talking about it enough. I mean, we kind of dismissed Rachaad White a little bit, but they didn't really try to upgrade too much. They got a back in Bucky Irving, but really they kind of committed to the skill players that were doing their thing last year. I mean, we'll see the battle between Trey Palmer and Jalen McMillan. That's maybe the one thing that we watch for the slot or third receiver, depending on how they align Chris Godwin. But yeah, don't forget about Chris Godwin in this mix. He's a pretty key target here for Mayfield. But yeah, that's a good start. And really their whole schedule is good when you play in the very weak NFC South, and you also get to cross over a little bit to the AFC West. Don't forget about that, because we talked about the Broncos being a good matchup, but Chargers are not bad. Raiders are not bad. And then Chiefs, there's going to have to be high volume against them. You'd figure in that type of game, Mayfield's going to be throwing a lot. So there are a lot of good aspects I like about the Bucs schedule.
Yeah, specifically looking at Mike Evans, I do feel like we've been overlooking him, and just like the consensus boards are as well. He's going as wide receiver 19. He's going after like Deebo Samuel, Nico Collins, Stephon Diggs. I want Mike Evans over all of those guys. He's going right before Cooper Kupp and DK Metcalf, Devonta Smith. But like, I think that's too low after what we saw the connection with Evans and Baker last year. Now, like this early schedule does get me very excited. And like you said, like pretty much the whole schedule's rather friendly to this passing core here. I can't get on the Chris Godwin train. He just needs too many targets to be successful. But Mike Evans at wide receiver 19, that's a really nice cost for him.
Yeah, we'll see how it develops in that receiving core. Palmer had some chemistry, but he still wasn't used a lot with Mayfield. McMillan, I really liked him in Washington. So he gets an opportunity here to show what he's got. And K. Dotton could be a bigger part of what they do at tight end, just a little bit of a philosophy change. So there are some targets to be had. And if Godwin starts to fade behind Evans, that's great for Evans, but also great for some of these peripheral targets that could step up here. And Godwin's getting old. He's had some knee issues. So there's that. Well, Mike Evans just is like automatic. Like you can almost count on him for 1,000 yards. I mean, not always going to give you that close to 100 receptions because he's so inconsistent catching the ball, but he's going to make big plays. He's going to score. He's always going to push for 1,000 yards and 10 touchdowns. So if you start with that as a floor for Mike Evans, you gotta like it and say that's reachable this year.
Now I almost put this quarterback wide receiver duo with the best top of the year's schedule. It's Jordan Love and Jayden Reed with the Packers. I mean, the Packers could not have gotten a more offensive friendly schedule to start the year, really all the way down to their week 10 bye. I mean, it's amazing. In 5 of their first 9 games, they're going to face a team that allowed the top 6. They allowed the top 6 in fantasy points per game to quarterbacks last year. That's the Eagles, the Rams, the Cardinals, the Jaguars, and the Lions. And then their other 3 games during that span, or 4 games during that span, it's the Colts, were middle of the pack, the Titans, middle of the pack, the Vikings, middle of the pack. I don't know what team I'm missing here. I think the Texans as well. That's maybe the hardest.
The Cardinals and Rams are there too in that first half. So
Yeah.
there's some really good opportunities there. I think all the way through the Jaguars in week 8. And don't forget they have the Lions in week 9. So actually very good schedule. I think if you look all the way to their week 10 bye. So you can keep going, Michelle. Like the Packers were one of the biggest winners I had, not just in fantasy, in reality. I mean, their schedule was supposed to be, quote, tough because they were a playoff team last year, but I don't know how this could have worked out any better for their offensive prospects this season.
And Jayden Reed, I mean, we've been excited about him all off season long, and I think he's going to get a really fast start. I mean, you get the Eagles right off the bat, and I know they made improvements to the secondary. I do expect them to be better, but they allowed the most fantasy points to wide receivers last year. Their secondary was atrocious. Then they get the Titans in week 3, allowed the 6th most. Then they get the Vikings in week 4, allowed the 4th most points to wide receivers. And then they get the Rams in week 5, allowed the 8th most to wide receivers. It's like it just keeps going and going. It's a beautiful schedule for those two. They should have a really nice year. I've been a little bit lower on Jordan Love's draft cost, but looking at the schedule, he really should come through big time this year.
Yeah, this is the 2nd straight year. I mean, I really like Jordan Love because of the schedule last year. So now you're right, Michelle. The cost goes a little bit higher because now he's not as sneaky, right? We had him as a QB2 cost. Now you have to pay high-end QB1. So he's got to live up to the expectations of that level of scoring, but the path is there to do so with that schedule. And again, Jayden Reed is still a guy we're sleeping on as well at wide receiver. We're kind of talking about the other Packers receivers and all that, but Jayden Reed was really a great fantasy performer down the stretch.
In our next segment, we're going to get into 2 offenses, like whole offenses that have a really nice start to the season. And then in our final segment, we'll talk about 2 quarterbacks who have just a beautiful start to the season as well for their fantasy outlook. We'll get into all of that in just a moment. This episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is brought to you by the Game Time app. Buying tickets to your favorite events shouldn't be stressful. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. With killer deals on last-minute tickets and their best price guarantee, you can stop stressing over the tickets and start getting hyped for the fun you'll have. I know I'll be using this app all summer long, wanting to go to Astros games at the last moment. It's the fastest growing ticketing app in the country for a reason. Get images of your seat before you buy so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. Buy tickets in a matter of seconds, 2 taps, and you are set. And tickets are sent directly to your phone so you never have to dig through your email. Take the guessing work out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, that's code LOCKEDONNFL, LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Terms do apply. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, 3rd best schedule, because we're going in order. We're going to go through 6 best schedules, whether it be a whole offense or a player in particular. But when you're looking at the Lions schedule, it's hard just to pick out one person. I mean, it's really the whole offense that has a really nice schedule. But Jared Goff, man, we know Jared Goff at home is so much better in fantasy. The splits are absurd. They're just absolutely insane. 21 fantasy points per game at home, 12 fantasy points per game on the road over the last 2 seasons. Well, right off the bat, he gets 3 home games out of the first 4 games, including each of the first 2 are at home. And then also he doesn't even have to play outside of a dome until like week 8. Like pretty insane.
Yeah, this is crazy. Remember what they did to the Lions last year? They said, "Here, you go play the Chiefs in the opener." And what did the Lions do? They won the game. They end up winning 12 games, go all the way to the NFC Championship, hold a lead, blow it. So I guess the NFL was like, "Okay, you guys proved yourself last year. We'll treat you like an established team, give you an easy early schedule." And man, they didn't benefit. Maybe that hype from last year was kind of cooled down because okay, the Lions are good, so you don't have to say, okay, we're going to try to show you guys the Lions are good. And they're like, okay, we'll give you this favorable schedule. I mean, Rams, Buccaneers, these are actually 2 playoff rematches from last year. And then you get the Cardinals, Seahawks. So you get 3 NFC West opponents here to start. And you said the 3 home games as well. So that's really nice. I wish they didn't have the bye so early, but that's fine. I think it'll get a little bit harder with the Cowboys, but it gets easier again with the Vikings and Titans. And then you have the Packers and Texans, which could be 2 very high scoring games, which is great for Jared Goff. And so home or away, yeah, the splits are pretty definitive here. I just like the Lions being competitive. They're going to just be an established team. So everyone knows they're good. They're going to give them their best fight, put up some points. You got to have some resistance on the other side. So yeah, the Lions were also a big winner. I mean, the Packers Lions, I mean, I think this is going to continue a little bit of theme that if your team is in the NFC North, they're going to maybe produce well based on their schedule.
Yeah, I mean, even like just looking at the opponents, it's not even just being home, right? Getting to be home against the Rams and Buccaneers to open up the year is just amazing that you're home. But also, the Rams gave up the 4th most points to quarterbacks last year. The Bucks gave up the 9th most. Their one away game during that span is against the Cardinals, who are one of the worst pass defenses in the league last year, 2nd worst in the league. So it's like it's beautiful there for him to start the year, and then it does get harder after the Week 5 bye. But then also even for Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery, right? They get to face the Cardinals and the Seahawks in 2 of the first 4 games. Those are 2 of the 3 worst rush defenses in the league last year. So really big upside for them to start the year. We know like if Jared Goff is going to be good, then Amon-Ra St. Brown is going to be good. That's his favorite guy. And Sam Laporta. So I expect really high points from the Lions to start the year. But then also what's interesting is the Bears get a really nice schedule to start the year. Now, is this a good thing though, that it starts easier, right? Because maybe there still will be some growing pains with a rookie quarterback. So maybe you'd kind of want the easier schedule later once they all have meshed together. But I mean, you get the Titans depleted defense. The Texans are solid enough, but the Colts gave up the 4th most points per game to offenses last year. They get the Rams. They get the Panthers, who gave up this 5th most points per game last year. And then the Jaguars, who gave up the 6th most fantasy points per game to quarterbacks. Those are their first 6 games of the year with a Week 7 bye. Like, really nice start to the season for them. And Caleb Williams is it's pretty soft defenses to start his career.
Yeah, we're also sensing a theme that it's very helpful for these teams to play the NFC West and the AFC South. Like, that's really good because some of these defenses, except for that one team in San Francisco, that's the tough team. But like the rest of the teams are very manageable, right? All the teams in the South you're not scared of, and Rams, Cardinals, Seahawks. So when you have that in addition to a division not necessarily known for defense, I think the Packers and Lions have tried to improve, and that's why I like the Packers and Lions a little bit more in reality, where I think the Bears and Vikings are not as complete teams. But that said, we should be happy that Caleb Williams is going to get off to a fast start, get comfortable with his weapons. He's looked awesome so far in rookie minicamp, so get it going. DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, Rome Odunze, get it going and make him feel confident. So you could look at it that way, right? We could have easier matchups, but we also know they've declared him the starter from week 1. There's no battle. There's none of that. He needs a good start. Build that confidence, be great in the second half, live up to that QB1 top 12 type of value here. And again, it's great for all the weapons. So I'm excited to see what the Bears can do. And then Caleb Williams maybe being a guy that you want to target a lot in drafts. And then on the flip side of that, if you draft him, he might be a very good tradable asset for you once he gets past those early games.
What's even, I mean, even after his bye, he gets the Commanders and the Cardinals, the top 2 worst passing defenses last year. So it keeps getting nice. Maybe after that point, that's when you try to sell him, because then he gets the Patriots and the
Yeah.
Packers. It gets a little bit harder. The 49ers later on. But yeah, this throughout the whole schedule, they were pretty nice to the Bears in terms of like where their opponents are in within the year. So Caleb Williams just keeps being a value in drafts. I know we're worried about him being a rookie, but we've seen, I mean, just last year we had the CJ Stroud, right? And I know we had the Justin Herbert a few years ago. It's not often that rookies are great for fantasy, but it does happen. And with Caleb Williams being at quarterback 16 cost, I think it's really worth the risk for him, even if you pick him up as your second quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, there's just everything lining up for him, and now you get afraid when things are too good, or you get a little nervous, right, when that happens. But I don't think that's the case here. I mean, I think what you see is what you get. He's got a lot of skilled players around him. This Bears team is an upward trajectory. The schedule is good, so everything adds up. So I don't know if he's going to be QB 16 in a lot of drafts for long. I think he's going to start creating some hype as he takes the field more in training camp and preseason. And so get him while you can. This is a good time to draft Caleb Williams while he's cheap. And now we will look at a couple of more players. And these two guys that we're going to talk about in the final segment are not cheap. I'll just say that, but it's good. You'll feel confident about taking them early in your draft. So those are coming up in our final segment. All right, it's an exciting time in the NBA NHL. Like, it's really heating up or cooling off, however you want to look at it, on the hardwood or the ice. It is just fantastic, and it's winner take all time as we're getting closer to the finals and the Stanley Cup finals there. And FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. So a lot of good stuff to get in on the action as we wait for all these NFL games on the schedule to be actually played. We do have a lot of these other games that you can get in, including MLB. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make sure every playoff shot you take counts. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, I have to laugh because we've picked two quarterbacks here that also happen to be the two quarterbacks we took early back to back to start our SuperFlex 2 QB. I get, well, yeah, it's the 2 QB with SuperFlex, but Dynasty League here. These are the two quarterbacks we targeted. So I have to laugh because I guess we're going to feel good about this, Michelle. Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts are going to get off to hot starts.
I mean, listen, they gave the Bills the Arizona Cardinals in week 1.
Oh,
Now,
gosh.
I do expect the Cardinals offense to be better this year. Maybe that helps out their defense, but their defense still on paper. I mean, they were terrible last year, and on paper, they still don't look like they're going to be really any better, right? So, yeah, I can't. And it's in Buffalo as well. Like, Josh Allen could put up 40 points in this game right away. In week 2, they do have to go to Miami, and it's never fun for opponents to have to play in Miami, but in September, but it is a night game. So by the time that happens, the sun should be almost all the way down. It'll still be a little hot, but the sun won't be murdering them like we'll be talking about on tomorrow's show. Some teams that have to play Miami early on. And then like, also, the Jaguars should be a high-scoring game. They do have to go to at the Ravens and at the Texans and at the Jets, but those all three should be high-scoring games, right? With the offenses we expect on the other side. So a lot of high-scoring games we'd be predicting here early on in the schedule, and then some nice matchups as well. Like Josh Allen could get off to a real. I mean, he's going to be hot all year long, but the start could be like absurd for him.
Yeah, absolutely. And he could just carry your team for quite a while. And Michelle was lucky to have him there in Superflex as the first QB. But I'll be excited to talk about my guy in a second. But really, the second half is actually a little tougher, I'll say, because he gets the Patriots and Jets come playoff time. I mean, the Lions are beatable there. Also gets the 49ers in week 13. So he might be a guy that you can get massive return on, right? If you draft him in a 1 QB league, and you're saying, okay, I'm weak at other positions, and draft a good backup, that he could really return you some good value later in the season if you want to make that deal. So if you just want to hang on to him, he's going to carry your team for a while. And it's okay. if you're kind of on the fence, do I take a borderline wide receiver 2, or do I take Josh Allen? You're going to take Josh Allen because he's going to have more impact on your team. I mean, he's as safe as it gets. He doesn't get hurt. He's always
Knock
scoring
on
at the
wood, Vinny.
yeah. He's big and strong. Like, no, he's pushing everyone out of the way. Like, no one is hurting this guy. Okay, I just jinxed it, but it's fine. He's not like Cam Newton. This guy, I think, just takes care of himself really well. So he's not frail like that. And again, a freight train that you can put in your lineup, and he loves to take over games. And I think he could run even more right this year because that's the nature of the offense with James Cook. Maybe he's not going to pass as much to newer targets. So that could be great as well for fantasy. So I love it with Josh Allen this year.
And then Jalen Hurts, you brought it up. Other one that has a nice schedule, particularly on the ground, right?
Yeah.
You brought up that the beginning schedule of the Packers, Falcons, Saints, they all struggled against quarterbacks rushing last year. The Buccaneers also struggled in that area. Plus, the Buccaneers secondary is very good, with the Saints secondary being inconsistent, with the Packers secondary being inconsistent as well. But it's a nice outlook for Jalen Hurts as well in terms of his rushing, especially.
Yeah, he'll miss Jason Kelsey inside, but I think they have some contingencies there to do the tush push or whatever to make sure he's still getting the short touchdowns, and these teams are still giving that up. But yeah, I mean, this is just talking about him as a runner, and the Packers forever have been known, it doesn't matter who their defense coordinator is, not being able to stop running quarterbacks. It's been a while. So that's a great start. So in Brazil, Friday night, lock in. I think he has a big game to start the season. Again, him and Jordan Love going back and forth. That's what we want. So it can be an awesome fantasy Friday as well as Thursday with the Chiefs and Ravens playing each other. So I love that to start. And then getting the NFC South. Sense a theme here. Like if you're playing the NFC South, you're going to have some success early in the season. So I'm excited for that for sure. And then once he gets out of that, Michelle, it's not bad either. I wish the bye was a little bit later, but then again, you might be happy the bye is over. Then you have to find a replacement quarterback later in the season, assuming he's durable, and you don't have to turn to Kenny Pickett. Browns in week 6, but then it's the Giants, Bengals, Jaguars. So very good opportunity with the matchups and maybe some high scoring there to put up some numbers. So I really like it here for Jalen Hurts, and really another guy that you should watch right along with Jalen Hurts, Saquon Barkley. He can get out of the gate really well with his new team.
Yeah, it's just it's a nice schedule for these guys, which is good, right? Because I mean, if you're going to spend up on these quarterbacks, you need them to have the ability to like not just outproduce the other quarterbacks, but like really, really outproduce them. If
Right.
you're taking them in the second, third round, they need to score like at least 50, 100 more points than the quarterbacks you're grabbing in the 10th round, right? Because you need to make up that difference of the other player that you're missing out on taking that early. But when you're looking at these schedules, it could happen, especially Josh Allen's schedule gets me a lot more excited than Justin Hurts, but I think it was important to bring up, like, he's going to face some good ones with the running. And we know rushing is the, fantasy. What am I trying to think of here?
Cheat code.
Yeah, cheat code. Thank you. We're just lost my brain there for a second. But that's it for today's show. We're going to be back tomorrow talking about the hardest schedules to start the season for fantasy guys. And if we're worried about them, right, we'll go through the top 6 guys or offenses that have the hardest schedule to start the 2024 season. That will be tomorrow. Don't miss it. Bye, y'all.